Welcome to KLTV.news. I'm Christy Lee. I'm super excited to be joined today by Sharyl Attkisson. She's a longtime Emmy Award-winning journalist, correspondent, host of Full Measure, doing a lot of very important independent work. Also author. I have two of your books, Sharyl. Let's just welcome you in. I have The Smear and Slanted, and just wanted to talk to you because this has been an ongoing conversation about journalism and really be interested to hear your take on. I feel like in the 20 years I've been in the news business that it changed quite dramatically over the past 2 years. What has yours experience been? You've been in journalism a lot longer.
Well, I've watched what I would call a slow devolution of the news that I have written about in the books. But I would say in 2016, there was a concerted effort, beginning with Donald Trump on the political stage, by powerful interests to shape news in a way that we had never seen before, including online and online access to information and news. Because in my view, that was the last place, sort of the wild frontier, that was not dominated by political and corporate interests. People were still able to go online, even if they couldn't get it on TV, and see unfettered access to information. Well, a lot of people who are against Donald Trump, particularly corporations that didn't fare well or didn't think they would fare well under a Trump presidency because they had not gotten him elected, a lot of them thought this was a huge flaw in their ability to control information. So they went after the online universe quite successfully from the 2016 to the 2020 time period, whereby there are people that may not even remember now. You used to be able to get information that you wanted to get without these third parties, these conflicted interests coming in and telling you, you can't see something, you can't hear something, you can't read something. So it's been a huge change.
In your book, The Smear, you talk about media matters and you compare that to an anthill. Can you explain that to people that are not in journalism so they can understand what's going on?
Well, there are a lot of groups, and there have been comparisons and dissections of conservative, liberal, and groups in between that control the information landscape in a way that people can't imagine. And one of them that had not been really well dissected is the liberal propaganda group Media Matters that I dug into for the book. And it was like an anthill in terms of all the trails underground that you don't see when you just see that one little hole that comes up the top. Well, like that, Media Matters turns out to be a conglomerate of organizations and big money, really the same group of people, but under different names. Maybe the name is the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Maybe the name is Share Blue. Maybe the name is a Political Action Committee. But these are the same people collecting millions upon millions of dollars to influence the information you get, to interact with news people, to get stories planted in the press, to pretend to be the media and plant stories that they want put out there. And I think, again, people underestimate how powerful relatively few interests are when they work in this fashion through a network of nonprofits and political action committees and LLCs and websites and so on.
One thing that I've noticed, particularly as a news anchor in this past year, was a lot of adjectives in the scripts. There were a lot of times that there were no sources given. And it seems like there's been a lot of character assassinations. I just read an article today that says, referring to discredited scientists and doctors, but discredited according to who? It doesn't give a source, it just says discredited. So along this line of character assassination, it seems like they talk about the person instead of the issue or the science or the data. It just always goes after the person. And I know that you have talked about that this has gone beyond just name calling, but they want to destroy these people's lives. Can you talk about that?
Well, yes, and that is a key hallmark of how you can see that there's astroturf likely at play, these powerful interests. They want to distract from the information. Maybe they don't have a good argument, or maybe they think the information they don't want you to know about is pretty good information. So they attack those who are reporting or the scientists who are researching that information in a very personal way, with the idea that the destruction is necessary. And they may attack them over something completely unrelated to the issue at hand, because if you discredit or destroy somebody in their profession, or get their bosses worried about them, or get them fired from their job, or get a scientist where the bosses at the academic institutions of the hospital where he works come down on him because suddenly they think he's controversial with something he's researching that they don't want researched. This is how they operate, but that's a key sign. It should be, and I think a lot of people realize this, for people in the public to understand that there are forces trying to manipulate information that person is giving or giving access to.
Another observation I've had is that we're supposed to be holding government accountable, but instead it seems like more and more it's becoming the mouthpiece. And if you question any three-letter agency, you're suddenly a conspiracy theorist. And my question is, we don't want to think that there's sinister things going on, but at the same time, this is personal to you because you say that you were even hacked into your computer.
Well, going back to trusting the government, I talked in my first book about how I naively graduated from college thinking the government kind of always had to tell the truth, as silly as that sounds. And my realization and experience with stories as to how this is often not the case and why. And it's healthy and natural. A free press should be asking questions of government, whoever's in charge. Doesn't mean that what they're saying isn't true, but oftentimes it's not a complete story. Sometimes it's not true. And it's up to us to help uncover that, not just vomit out the propaganda. We were taught in journalism college that when you're issued a press release or a statement from a corporation or government, you're not to just report that verbatim if you're doing a news story about it. You're supposed to dig into that if you think there's something newsworthy and say, what is the full picture? Is it being told here? What is the news? And instead, I saw at CBS News where I work that we started just regurgitating the party line, I would call it, of whoever they wanted to believe that was in a position of power, unquestioningly and very unjournalistically, and found out many times that what we were parroting was completely wrong, if not at the very least misleading or one-sided. So that's been a huge change. And yes, the government did spy on my computers. It was a surprise to me too, because it was before we knew they were doing it to so many people. And the only reason I learned of it as I was doing stories about government issues was I had intelligence sources that told me this was going on, not just with me, but with a lot of people. And I'm still in court trying to fight that because the Department of Justice, despite the airtight forensics, which are like a fingerprint proving what the government did, if the Department of Justice isn't going to hold its own accountable, and I'm forced at my own expense to go to court to try to sue them, well, that's a huge uphill battle I've learned. It doesn't matter that you have the forensic proof, a former federal agent admitting it, affidavits from the FBI and NSA sources. You have to get to a jury, and it's really hard to get past those first hurdles to even get to a jury to show them the information. But we're starting discovery in my case all these years later, actually right about now.
I'm finding that journalism is being redefined, especially for the younger generation. I admire when I follow you, your tweets and your journalistic integrity. It does seem to me that you share both sides, but even through that, you get attacks and called right-wing conspiracy theorist. So is this younger generation of reporters falling victim to the name calling, falling victim to peer pressure, and also this rise of what they call advocacy journalism, where suddenly it's an excuse to take a political position? Thoughts on that?
I think you said it well when you said it's being redefined. There is an effort, as in many issues in our society, to redefine journalism as we once knew it. And I was shocked when I first saw journalism professors quoted during this time period, 2016, and past Donald Trump's election, when I saw them trying to redefine journalism so it could be used as a tool rather than to provide information, but as a tool of destruction for a side or an issue or an idea that certain people didn't want out there. I saw journalism professors quoted in letters to the editor that were put in highly placed publications that said things like, fairness and objectivity is overrated. There are young people that are telling others at noted news organizations, well, we don't have to keep our opinions out of our stories as long as our opinions are supported, in fact, which doesn't even quite make sense because that's not the point. So yes, there's been an effort, a widespread effort to redefine journalism and what it is that we do and turn it into something where we are advocating for one side or idea and making sure people don't believe or don't even see or hear anything that's contrary to that. And that's the opposite, I think, of what you and I came to believe journalism was.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, how are you surviving in this new climate? Like, you still have your show Full Measure. Have you had any threats to continuing what you're doing or being censored?
Well, surprisingly, people have told me, not very many, people have told me that sometimes completely factual stories that are supported have no unsupported opinion in them. They're footnoted and cited. I too have been subjected to the big tech censorship. If I've reported that CDC has reported false information about COVID-19, which is factually correct, sometimes that tweet or that article that I've written, I'm told, is censored when people try to share it. But this is all part of that dynamic we've discussed that I understand quite well. Overall, I've had quite a good platform. We have 43 million households we feed to on broadcast every Sunday. This is the biggest platform I've ever had, and that's continuing on for season 7, starting in a couple of weeks. And then I also try to cross post what I do and where I write at SharylAttkisson.com. You know how hard it is to be an independent journalist, but a lot of people want that independent news that the side of the story they're not getting elsewhere, or a piece of information they can't find because big tech is censoring it. I'm trying to, like you are, put that in a place that's accessible for people. And I'm just like you, trying to keep at it and get as many eyeballs as I can, at least for people who want the information, provide a way for them to get it without telling them how they have to think or what they have to do with it.
And to wrap this up, because you've been so generous with your time, what is your advice to truth seekers, and what is your advice to up and coming journalists on how to navigate?
Well, for the viewing public, I think don't be silent about what you see that's going on that's wrong with journalism or with this clampdown on information. Don't be bullied into the notion that it's just so big and so bad, there's nothing you can do. Keep talking about it, keep fighting it. It's very important. And quite frankly, I think a majority of people in the public, whatever their political party, they don't like the notion of ceding your ideas and the ideas of what you can access to some conflicted third party, which is ultimately directed by a corporation or political interest. As far as journalists, I think it's a tough landscape because they may find themselves working for places that don't want anybody that's not going to advocate in a one-sided way. And I don't really know how to advise in a circumstance like that. But I do tell people, and I'm on advisory boards, and I do work at my alma mater, the University of Florida Journalism College, and try to encourage people to think about writing and reporting off the given narrative, whatever it is, to find out what's really going on that other people aren't saying, to stick to the facts, to consider all viewpoints, to do more of what I think you and I consider journalism used to be, and what I think a lot of people are really thirsty for. I guess that's what I would tell a journalist, is to try to open your mind and find the better story when it's not necessarily what you thought or what someone told you to report, but when you find out what's really going on.
And the best ways that we can support you and independent journalism is your books are on Amazon, I assume, or they go to your website. Where can we find you and support you?
Thank you. I try to cross post almost everything at SharylAttkisson.com. You can get Slanted, The Smear, and Stonewalled anywhere that books are sold. And just keep talking about it and share these articles and stories. When you see something that could be of value to people, try to circulate them, because this environment is so tough to get good factual information on certain topics out because of the censorship. Try to get it around yourself to your friends and family.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Sharyl. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.